welcome to our weekly discussion, Moral Side of the News. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children. Joining me today, as always, a distinguished panel, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, Father Toan, St. John the Apostle Catholic Church, and Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. This week saw Iran's first ever direct attack on Israel. The world watching the assault as over 300 missiles and drones were launched.
Tonight here in Israel, the War Cabinet meeting behind closed doors for a second day in a row. Israel tonight making it clear there will be a response to the first ever direct assault from Iran on Israel. 300 missiles and drones targeting Israel. 99% of those missiles and drones blocked, taken out of the sky with the help of the U.S. Late today, Israel's top military chief vowing they will respond to Iran.
Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
And tonight, the White House and other world leaders urging extreme caution, warning Israel to be extraordinarily careful with whatever decision it makes. The U.S. warning Israel it will not participate in any Israeli counterstrike on Iran. President Biden today saying the U.S. is committed to Israel's security and commended the U.S. efforts to help protect Israel from Iran's attack.
Together with our partners, we defeated that attack.
It was just before midnight Sunday, under the cover of darkness, the Iranian assault beginning to unfold. For the roughly 15 minutes that followed, total uncertainty. Then, as the scope of this was revealed, Israeli and U.S. officials stunned by the sheer scale of the Iranian attack. A swarm of nearly 200 drones and cruise missiles, followed by the launch of about 130 bus-sized ballistic missiles timed to confuse Israel's defenses. Fighter jets from the U.S., France, England, and Israel taking out the vast majority of drones and cruise missiles. Ballistic missiles seen here streaking over Jerusalem, blasted out of the sky by Israel's aerial defense system, including the Arrow high-altitude anti-missile systems. Israel saying it knocked out 99% of those threats. The Pentagon saying the U.S. destroying about 80 drones and 6 ballistic missiles. Video circulating online verified by ABC News showing one of the very few Iranian missiles that hit their target, causing minor damage to an Israeli Air Force base. The IDF saying this video shows troops recovering parts of an Iranian ballistic missile from the Dead Sea. The sole casualty, a 7-year-old girl severely wounded by shrapnel. She survived and is now recovering in a hospital.
We've been training for this for years. We understood that Iran is the negative player of the region.
It's not quite over.
Of course not. Iran is involved in everything negative.
The White House calling Iran's attack a spectacular and embarrassing failure. And tonight, the White House avoiding weighing in on any possible Israeli response now coming.
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. You're asking me to get ahead of, as far as I know, a decision that the War Cabinet hasn't even made.
And in Tehran today, a massive rally in support of the attack on Israel. Iranian leaders signaling they don't want an escalation, saying that after their assault, they consider the matter closed. But tonight, Iran warning Israel if it takes additional action, Iran will respond within seconds.
So two very notable first here, Iran with a direct attack on Israel, and then Israel being defended by Arab countries for the first time ever. United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan all shooting down missiles. How do you see this playing out?
I mean, once you unravel a thread, you just keep pulling, pulling, and pulling. And of course, this all started because of the attack, of the response to the attack on October 7th. And then, of course, the overkill response, I would call it that, of Israel since then on Gaza, etc. So it's just one thing led to another, and it's way beyond a simple response to the terrorist attack from October 7th. And I think it'll get worse before it gets better. You know, I'm a Bible student. You know, there has been a long history between Iran and Israel, or Persia and Israel. They go back many, many centuries, of course. There would be no rebuilt, biblically, no rebuilt Jerusalem without the help of Persia or Iran. So with the aid of Cyrus, it allowed the prophet or the rebuilders, Nehemiah, to go back and rebuild the wall in Jerusalem. So it has a long biblical history, and it's been a favorable one, I might say. So, Iran Persia has had a history of being a protector and an aid to biblical Israel. And I wouldn't call modern day Israel biblical Israel, but there has been a history of the connection between the biblical Israel and the biblical Persia or Iran. So, I mean, it's a sad situation, but it's not a surprise.
Sally or Father Toan?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure what I want. I want to listen first. So go ahead. You say what you want to say first.
Well, I have two comments, and for both sides of the issues here. On the one hand, I'd like to know who's really supporting Iran to make such a bold step. As you noticed earlier, there's two notable things, that this is the first ever direct attack on Israel, and there must be some support behind that. On the other hand, on the western side of the issue here is those countries like France, Germany, and Canada. As I read this morning in other news, they strongly verbal condemns the act, the attack, and all of that. But what else can they do to really deter the further escalation? Even the head of the UN, Gutierrez, Antonio, all of those just rhetorics. And I think I'm becoming, in a sense, after so many decades now, I am becoming more and more weary of what the UN can do in things like this. They all bureaucracy and talks without really, I'm losing trust over them over the years more and more. What can they do to deter really further escalation rather than just verbal rhetoric?
Are we just talking decades? Are we not talking forever in the Middle East? I mean, it seems to have been going on for forever,
Right.
and I don't know how anybody else around the globe is going to be able to solve the situation because we're not in it. And do we just let them fight it out, or do we try to de-escalate? Is there the possibility of de-escalation from the other countries?
Well, I mean, speaking of verbal, now many are not in support of what Israel is doing in Gaza. They're being condemned almost wholesale based on their actions. And all the condemnation has been just verbal. So even President Biden has condemned Israel's action against Gaza. So it has not stopped Israel from its attacks on Gaza, not one iota. So no one seems to be, with the aside of the strongly worded chasten, there's been no action to condemn the actions of Israel, the continued escalation of Israel against Gaza. So that's not a war. It's not like Gaza is fighting back. There's not an even fight there. It's an overkill. So even if Israel was to practice the biblical eye for an eye, even that would have been more humane than what's being conducted currently by Israel against Gaza. So once you move out of the realm of a fair fight, so to speak, and the protocols, then it's a free-for-all at that point, because nobody is responding. Israel certainly is not responding to any condemnation of its actions. So other than the position that Biden has taken now, that he won't assist him if they choose to attack Iran, but I think it's been a pretty wholesale condemnation of Israel's overkill against Gaza. So that has just created the current response. At least Iran has done something. Not saying they justify by no means, but at least with the continued response, military response or attack of Israel, they're the only ones that have put some muscle behind their condemnation of the actions of Israel.
And you can't wipe out all of Hamas. I don't care what it is that you're trying to do just by going in and saying, are you going to kill every child? Is that what you're going to do? Because some child is going to remember what happened to his or her parents and say, okay, you're responsible for the genocide of my people, and therefore the fight's going to continue, is it not?
And then every child, innocent child that's dead, Israel's held accountable for that.
Yes.
There's no excuse for that. So every innocent child, non-military death, you got to give account for that. So, I think it would do well if everybody would look up and get a moral compass reading on what is right and what is wrong, and just stop it.
But at the same time, I have not heard recently people talked about the 1,200 people who were killed during the first attack, and still hundreds of hostages still being held, and not much discussion about those first initial attack on innocent people, but on both sides, not just the Jewish people, but at the same time.
The math does not add up. It's at least 30,000 killed. You mentioned 1,200. So I mean, so the math does not balance out.
That's I agree, but evil must start from somewhere, and I think the killing, the attack on both sides is evil to begin with. And we talk on one side, but we don't talk about the other side. And it's a really complicated situation. I agree with you. It's been going on for not just a few decades. It's been going on since beginning. And we may never have the solution in our lifetime, I don't think. It's one of the very difficult situation. But one thing I would like to add to this is we call certain things like certain country or certain group of people like adversaries, like Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia. Adversaries or enemies, if we wanted to use the strong word, they look at the weakness of the other side. That's how they rise up to stir up problem.
Well, but I'm saying, I want to get back to the point. And we need to narrow it down. We can't go bring the whole biblical epic into the discussion. We can, but just going from October 7th to today, keep the scope within some reasonable realm. And two wrongs don't make a right. There's never a right way to do the wrong thing. So, and many try to imply there is, but there is not a right way to do wrong. And sometimes, so the response, the justified response of October 7th, now we in April, my way to May, and all the killing that has, the body count that's accumulated since then is on Israel. So at some point, you're responsible for your killing. The other side is responsible for their killing. And you can't just go on and on and on. Even with the biblical idea of eye for an eye would nip that in the bud alone. And even that was a step forward in terms of human measure of responses. So if you just use that measure alone, this killing would have stopped a long time ago. The Israeli attack would have stopped a long time ago. And it's gone from responding to the terrorist attack of October 7th to now you're just trying to exterminate, eliminate a whole group of people.
So essentially what we're saying is that we don't see that there's ever going to be a two-state solution.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that ideally would be the ideal. I think ideally that would be the ultimate way to solve it, because it was all Palestine at some point. Even the land of Gaza didn't belong to Israel. It was somebody else's land. The West Bank belonged to somebody else. So you even acquired land beyond the land that was given to you by the 1948 UN declaration. So I don't think Israel has been playing fair, and I think that there's a wrong way to respond to an attack, and it's gone way beyond that. So since they have not, Israel has not responded to some reasonable restraint on their response, then it just one thing escalates and escalates, and then and where's the end? Everybody's dead and gone. So
I think it is important too to point out that that Iran is saying that their attack right now that they did over the last weekend, is a result of 3 of their generals being killed, and they're blaming that on Israel. And Israel has not claimed responsibility for that yet either, or taken responsibility for that. So,
well, I think it's interesting, taking a step back. You know, being a Bible student, as I mentioned earlier, the role that Iran, Persia has played in the benefit, historical reestablishment of Jerusalem and Israel. They were great. In fact, Israel historically, biblically, has always been beholding to Persia because of the great benevolence it benefited throughout history, the rebuilding of the wall, and returning to Israel from being in exile for so many years. So I think there's been a longer history of benevolence between the two countries than the malevolence that is currently in place right now.
thank you for a great discussion on a very serious topic. Let's move on to topic 2. Thanks for watching and listening to Moral Side of the News this week. Topic 2, TARC leaders face tough questions this week as they presented budget cuts. They say are needed to stay afloat. Those cuts will mean fewer routes and fewer drivers.
Metro Council members were not too pleased with the budget that TARC presented. Some say the math just isn't mathing, and the financial challenges the transit system is facing need to be recalculated before any funding is approved.
TARC riders like Adana Choate are bracing themselves for TARC to have less routes available in January 2025.
It bothers me because it takes away from the parents that have to get to work to provide for their children.
This decision comes after the transit system has been facing what they call a fiscal cliff. Service reductions mean some TARC drivers will lose their job.
For them to actually be losing their income is, you know, that's going to impact them terribly.
TARC administration presented the budget they've been surviving on for years in front of Metro Council, sharing how they project $140 million of COVID funds to be exhausted by June 2025.
I can tell you this, and this is my 11th agency. I've been here almost 34 years, and this is the toughest budget I've ever had to bring over here.
TARC Interim Executive Director Ozzie Gibson says their operating budget expenses will be close to $110 million by 2025. Without the cuts, TARC leaders say there could be a budget gap as much as $30 million by mid-2026.
And yet you're saying we can't make up 15% cost reduction on a 20% reduction in labor. It's just not mathing for me.
Some council members question the numbers and urge TARC leaders to look for other solutions.
I would advise that you all go back to the drawing board.
When asked if layoffs were absolutely going to happen, Gibson said yes.
Probably is going to be somewhere, but could be 60 as high as 80.
TARC Union President Lillian Brent says at the end of the day, several families are going to be impacted.
It's going to be a layoff. It's still funding issues, even if they go back to the drawing board.
Brent says it's devastating to know that some of the jobs she and her colleagues look forward to every day will be cut soon.
So panel, I turn it over to you. TARC budget cuts.
I remember back in the 90s, early 90s, when I was still in college, and I used to take the TARC, the buses, from Southside Drive to downtown and other part of the city. That was how many decades ago? Back then still, and unless it's changed, and I understand some of the struggles of the people who use the bus TARC system. But back then, even then, it's surprising that even during peak hours or rush hours, there are very, very few who are on the bus themselves. So sometimes you have a whole hour sitting on a bus ride with 2, 3, 4 passengers. And I can see the other side of that. I don't necessarily support the idea of cutting, but I think we should find a better way to support or to help people who need public transportation, and not just cutting it. And at the same time, the service that we provide, does it really match up or make it proportionate with the cost and the budgets that's being used for this service? It's a very, very tough situation, and I see the issue that the council members are going through.
Well, it's, yeah, the bus, but people that ride the bus typically are poorer people. Okay, so it's more of the least of these that Jesus refers to in the Bible. So it tends to affect disproportionately the poor. Now, some people ride for recreation just because they choose to ride a bus, but in general, it affects those that have lower incomes, if any at all. So that's one fact. Another thing I noticed that they had some funds that are drying up from the COVID and from federal funds that apparently was used to subsidize the public transportation here in Louisville, maybe in other cities as well, probably so. You know, people forget that Kentucky is a poor state, a very poor state. In fact, it would not be wrong to refer to Kentucky as a welfare state, because they receive more federal funds than they pay in to the federal budget. So they are the recipient of federal funds disproportionately because of the poverty that exists in the state. So it's a welfare state. So it depends a lot on federal funds to operate general services in a way that many other states, like New Jersey, just simply do not. So the fact that federal funds are shrinking, however, whatever causes that, and most of the elected officials, either in Frankfurt and Washington, are fighting against that, but yet their state is a large recipient of those federal funds. So you have an electorate that is fighting against the needs of the state. So, but getting back to the cutting of the routes, I noticed in the reading that they were not going to cut routes. They may have maintained the route, but not as frequently in many respects. They're not going to cut out totally no routes there, but the frequency, the number of buses that are running, that likely would be the way they'll go with respect to these budget shortfalls. So it's a challenge, but it does disproportionately affect the poor, and that is the cause of great pause and concern.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And then I know that some cities have really unique public transportation, and it's, you know, more common that people would take public transportation than perhaps here in Louisville. And yet I agree with you about the need for the less fortunate who maybe don't have the money to pay for parking separate, you know, if they're driving a car. But I wonder if this is the kind of public transportation that we need. Do we need to look at other alternatives of public transportation that might be available in other cities and in other states, and if maybe something might not be more reasonable and more feasible for Louisville and Jefferson County than what we have?
Well, true. You know, cities like Atlanta, they have MARTA and down there, light rail and the like, and cities like that. Many larger cities already have other public means that we don't have here in Louisville. At one time, they were considering light rail. That plan was on the table. I don't know what happened to it, but it clearly is an opportunity to look at other alternatives. You know, the past mayor, he created bicycle routes, so maybe that was a part of his transportation solution. When I was in China a few years ago, bicycle riding was quite a popular means of getting around. In fact, I actually went on a pontoon tour through Beijing. So, but it may challenge us to look at other ways of providing transportation and be creative. You know, necessity is the mother of invention. So, but I think that it's been quite a while since I used the bus, though. I kind of think back when I did use the bus last time. I think I dropped off my car at a garage to have some work done. And since I was so close to Broadway, I said, I'm going to take the bus. So I decided to take the bus. And it was quite an experience, too. You have a different perspective on the city when you ride a public transportation.
Okay, Rebecca, for the next one, we're not going to roll the clip for Kaelin Clark, but we're going to move on to topic 3 with Kaelin Clark. And so we have a new face of March Madness, and it's a woman this year, Kaelin Clark. The draft was held this past week. And it came out after the draft that her starting salary is going to be $76,000.
But that's always been the case, though.
Right.
We're just now knowing about it.
And her male counterpart's going to make over $12 million. So she'll make less than 1%. Now, they play half the amount of games, and they have a lot less TV exposure, although every one of the, I think all but 3 I read, Indiana Fever games have now been picked up on ESPN this year to be broadcast. So, but your thoughts on that and
well, it's market driven. You know, this year has been a colossal year, in large part because of Kaelin Clark. But there's been a lot of great stars over the years that have played at her level in many respects, but hadn't garnered the viewership that this year has. So in that respect, like Don Steely said, who was the champion of South Carolina, she has helped enlarge their game overall. So everybody's going to benefit from that. And this salary has been at this level for quite a few years, and nobody's raised an eyebrow about it. But now, because she's getting into the arena, she's getting the popularity, now the eyes are on it. And the market is there. The market is there. You know, the viewership is up, everything is up, so I think something will be done. It's always been that way. Women have, I don't know if it's true in the churches, but, you know, they've always made just a little less than the men. So that's the cause for a continued
really,
fight.
Clay? You think? Yeah, you think that's possible? Yeah, I think that the notoriety that Kaelin Clark got, and I don't know if you saw the Saturday Night Live skit that started out with, "Oh, we're going to watch the men's game." No, we're going to watch the women's. And I think the more that they pay attention to the women's games, then I think the revenue will increase. And I hope when the revenue increases, then they will start to pay their players more. She can do independent contracts now
she will get
and make millions of dollars that way. But that doesn't help the whole team. That doesn't help the whole women's league. So hopefully this is the beginning of something new that's going to, you know, pick up and expand, because they're saying that the actual technique of the game is played better by the women.
It is.
I had a discussion, brief discussion about this subject a few days ago with one of my parishioners, and I made a comment, and I still believe that I just hope that the whole sport things will not, and I fear that it will not become an industry, because as long as we only focus, as you said, on the market driven, and it just, the gap and the difference between one and the others in terms of paid and reward is just unethical and very, in a sense, immoral.
Very good. Thank you for another great week of Moral Side of the News. Join us next week or look us up on YouTube for any past episode. Thank you to our panelists today, and have a great week.